The H1-B visa curbs in the US, and recently 3 names of Indian software companies have been announced as companies that played the H1-B visa system. Curbs in Australia on overseas workers, curbs in New Zealand, Singapore, the Gulf. As visa curbs mount, what does it mean for India's middle class and its global aspirations? I'm Poonam Saxena, the National Weekend Editor, and with me are Rajesh Mahapatra, Senior Editor, and Jayant Jacob, who tracks our Foreign Affairs Ministry. Rajesh, let me start with you. Why are these curbs being put in place for overseas workers, and why does it affect Indians the most, really?
So to understand this, Poonam, let's see what is happening in the US, and it's not happening only in the US; it's happening worldwide. As you very rightly said, Australia has come up with a plan to tighten its 457 visa category, which basically is a category under which skilled workers apply for work permits in Australia. New Zealand has said that it would now embrace a plan called Kiwi First. Donald Trump, of course, leads the bandwagon, saying that hire Americans, buy Americans. In the United Kingdom, we have seen what has happened. One of the triggers for Brexit was that the English people were losing their jobs to overseas workers, and that was one of the rallying points for the campaign for Brexit. And in the aftermath of Brexit, clearly United Kingdom no longer stands as a place that lures foreign workers. Something else also has gone much unnoticed, because we stay focused on this Western advanced economy, which is the Gulf, where a lot of Indians go, not necessarily the metro-based, urban-based, upwardly mobile middle class, the more skilled people, but a large number of people from the lower middle class and the middle class, semi-skilled, skilled in some of the technical work. The Gulf is probably the biggest destination for them. And there too we are seeing a sharp decline in the number of workers that are being engaged. Now, why is this happening? And this is not something that is happening in isolation. And this is not something that has come overnight. This has been in the build-up for quite some time. See, between the 1990s and the first decade of the millennium, until the Lehman Brothers crisis in 2008, the world economy was on a roll. Okay. The whole neoliberal economic policies kept getting a reaffirmation in economy after economy. Growth rates were robust. There was a lot of productivity gains that happened by way of new technologies, especially the information technology sector, that went through the roof. So there was growth, and there was also job creation happening around the world, and there was also some kind of a trickle down that was going on. But what has happened also is that in these 20 years, the phenomenal increase in incomes that you saw worldwide, a large part of that actually got appropriated by a very minuscule proportion at the top. A large majority of the people actually got a very smaller proportion of this incremental incomes that came their way. What that means, basically, people haven't actually seen their incomes grow as much as some of the rich people saw their incomes growing. So the rich-poor divide has widened further. More so, the gap between the ultra-rich, the super-rich, and the consuming middle class has grown further. Which means when people do not see their incomes grow proportionately, they cannot spend proportionately. And when you do not spend proportionately, what you have is what economists should explain, a problem of aggregate demand. So because there is not enough demand in the economy, companies start investing less. Newer projects become fewer and fewer. And when that happens, you obviously have a pretty disappointing picture that gets built around job growth. So if you look at the last 10 years, what is happening pretty much across the world, economies are struggling with what is called jobless growth. And there is also the other thing which has come about here is that technology. Technology has done two things. Technology has been displacing labor, and technology also has been making it possible that no matter which part of the world you are, you can serve your customers elsewhere. So there are a lot of jobs that have also moved around. So if you look at today, we are in a situation, India and China are perhaps the only two countries which are supporting globalization. Whereas every country, every economy is closing its doors, shutting down its workplaces to foreign workers, to everything that is foreign. Okay? Because there is a political backlash that is building up. There is a political clamor that is building up that, look, we need to create jobs. Unless we create jobs, we cannot sustain our growth, because unless we create jobs, there will be no new demand for additional consumption, and if there is no new demand for additional consumption, there will be no new investment happening. So what most of the advanced economies are fearing, that they see that we are now kind of getting trapped in a low investment, low capital, low demand cycle, and that threatens the future prospects of our economies, and therefore they have started looking inward. And that is primarily the reason why Donald Trump won, because he harped on those sentiments to say, look, we are losing jobs to outsiders, we are losing business to outsiders, so that's why his China bashing, that's why his his comments about how jobs are moving to software centers in India, they worked for him. And today when he has come, he has to address that political constituency, and therefore he starts talking about tweaking H1-B visa. And that's where he has to start now showing that, he's as good as his words, and he has to show them in action. And when US does that, that's about a quarter of your global GDP, and US in many of these things sets trends. Then there are countries like Australia, New Zealand, UK, and others who look up and say, hey, listen, the United States is doing it. Are we sort of losing sight of something that we ought to be doing? And that's what now we are seeing. That is what is happening, and it's clearly not a good news for India.
Do you think more countries will follow suit, Jay?
They can be, because if you look at what is happening common to all these countries, there is a political reason for that. Donald Trump said America first, and he started doing all these things. Australia, before the Prime Minister of Australia announced this, he said Australia first. Same with Kiwi. So there is a chance of many countries following the suit. But at the same time, we should understand that India gets more money in remittance than it gets in foreign direct investment. So remittance for India is a huge factor. For example, after Saudi Arabia, United States comes second in India getting remittance. It's around $11 billion US, which is a huge money. If you look at the remittance figure again, last 1 year there is a drop of 8.9%. It's like India's remittance. Still, India is the largest recipient of remittance from around the world. It's come down to $62.7 billion US, which is a huge drop for India. But I think more countries will follow the suit because of political reasons, and India has to innovate its strategy politically, also diplomatically, to address these issues. These issues are there to stay. For example, Trump has just ordered an executive process through which they will tweak the H1-B visa. At the same time, you shouldn't forget there are 3 bills in the US Congress which are more or less talking about the same thing, to curb and stop and regulate H1-B visa applicants. So the world is going to be a tougher place, and how you negotiate the curve is what needs to be seen.
I think before you go on to the next question, because I can see some viewers are saying the audio is not clear, we will be trying to speak a little louder to make it clear. If you have joined the discussion, we are talking about the visa curves that are mounting around the world and what does it mean to the Indian middle class and its global aspirations. I am Rajesh Mahapatra here. We have Poonam Saxena, our weekend editor, and Jayant, who covers our Foreign Affairs Ministry. If you have joined in, if you are liking the discussion, press the like button and do share this conversation, and do join us in putting out your questions that you may have. Yeah, Poonam.
I wanted to ask you, is the constituency that is going to be affected the most among Indians, is it software engineers mostly, or would it really cut across all kinds of professions?
If you talk about countries like US, Australia, Singapore, UK, a great deal of them are software professionals. But if you look at the Gulf, which is the 6 Gulf countries constitute 90% of India's labor export. So most of them are skilled and semi-skilled workers, and minuscule of them come from high-end techies, etc., etc. But the problem here is that more than 50% of India's remittance, again in economic terms, comes from these 6 countries. And these 6 countries last year, even if the figure is dropped by 33%, around 5.5 lakh people found jobs in these countries. So I think, answering your question further, when it comes to techie, high-end software kind of jobs, Australia, America, UK, Singapore is a market. When it comes to ordinary Indians, especially skilled, semi-skilled people and no-skilled people, etc., finding job and finding themselves socially and economically upwardly mobile, Gulf is a major destination. And also, unlike these countries, a worker in Gulf, since he is coming from a poor economic strata, most of the money he earns in Gulf is going back to India. So that also is somewhere related to the domestic economic activity in India as well. So what is happening in Gulf is also of a serious concern. Sheer number of people working there and the sheer volume of money they're sending back home.
So, yeah, I think, it is, if you are talking about H1-B visa, the biggest constituency that will be affected are the software engineers from India. I'm told Jayant has the statistics which shows nearly 85% of the H1-B visas in the information technology space actually goes to Indian workers. But there is a catch here, So everybody is talking about H1-B visa. H1-B visa or the visa curves from Australia are just a manifestation of something much bigger that is happening in these countries. These countries are closing their doors on foreign workers. And clearly, for an English-speaking country, at least an English-speaking middle class, India, India has been one of the major source of these foreign workers, be it the United Kingdom, be it the United States. Now, there is something else that the ramifications do not just get limited to the large number of families over here who are dependent on remittances from the Gulf, or they do not get limited to the so-called upwardly mobile global aspirations of a certain segment of our middle class which have trained in the in technical education, but it is also a reflection of what is going to happen to the hundreds of thousands of Indian students who go into these countries. Today the state of higher education is in India that after you finish your school, class 12, most parents now think that, where do and if their children are good, there are so few places for them to pursue further education. So each middle class family looks to take a bank loan, send its child to the United States with the hope that the child will get better education, will get a job in that land to pay off that loan. Okay. Now that dream is also crumbling. Today it is if you look at statistics, there are a couple of things happening. We have seen over the past 3 years a decline in students intake in United Kingdom. Precisely because the United Kingdom has made it very difficult for students to stay through jobs over there.
You can't work after you finish your studies.
The mainland Europe has already shut its door. It is virtually impossible, no matter how well you do there, to pass out from an institution there, even in the technical sphere, and get a job there. China, Russia, we cannot go because language is a barrier. There are some people who go to pursue medical courses there, but language is a barrier. So the United States and Australia were the two last resorts for this aspirational class that we are talking about. What we see today, and it is already getting reflected now, banks are seeing a decline in education loan applications. We are also seeing now a new phenomenon. Earlier, banks never bothered about asking what kind of subject is the student going to pursue. Now, banks have started making inquiries to what kind of subjects that the student is going to pursue, because they want to see, is this a subject that will, how employable is the subject, and what kind of university the person is going. They have started evaluating them, and they have started squeezing the loans that they are giving out. So what you are already seeing is that the educational loans for overseas education have already started coming down, and that actually is a reflection of how this whole dream is going sour. And it is a matter of concern because no matter what we say, we can have statements from government saying that, we are going to take it up. And I think limiting this to this IT worker and H1-B visa will be actually dangerous and consequential, because we will be missing the bigger question, bigger challenge, which is what are we doing about our higher education?
And also, what are we doing about our jobs? Because if the global workplace is no longer available for Indians, and many of them may need to come back to India, are there jobs for them here?
Yeah, if I can add one more point.
Jan, there is a request that you need to speak a bit louder.
Okay, I'll speak
and
loud.
Slowly.
Yeah.
That's a request from Anirvan.
Oh, okay, sure, I'll follow the suit. So I was saying that if you look at the Gulf data, it's not that all the jobs in Gulf countries have disappeared. Very interesting case study is how many people from Bangladesh or Pakistan finding jobs in these countries. Let's take the example of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is home to largest Indian passport holders outside India. 2 million Indians, almost 30 lakh Indians in one country. If you look at the statistics of how many people traveling to Saudi Arabia from Bangladesh over the years, it's very interesting. For example, in the year 2014, just about 10,000 people found job in Saudi Arabia from Bangladesh. Last year, the figure is 1,42,000. More Pakistanis find jobs in Saudi Arabia than Indians. So these figures also point to the fact that it's not all the jobs in the Gulf have dried up. There are jobs happening. Indian jobs are being taken away from not really skilled, semi-skilled workers from countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and some of the Southeast Asian countries. So in the job market, there are also things bilaterally you enter the country and get an agreement by which you can foster legal migration of workers. Sadly, India, some of these agreements and the country agreements prove to be faulty, affecting Indian workers. Let's take the example of Indian nurses. Earlier, private recruiters from all the 6 countries were allowed to recruit Indian nurses. Then government came up with a rule. Only 3 state government controlled agencies can recruit nurses. Through them only the foreign agents can recruit nurses, which doesn't work, because as long as this rule is restricted only to nurses from India, you can easily find nurses from the Philippines, Thailand, any other country you need. So I think the government of India should also, when they formulate policies, they shouldn't forget the fact that it is not the only Indians who seek jobs in these countries. They are equally qualified, more willing to work for, more people willing to work for less money from other countries are also trying for their jobs there. So I think government should have a very holistic, also very pragmatic approach coming to negotiate this kind of agreements through which you are sending your workers there.
Do we also need a diplomatic sort of outreach to these countries?
I think India has been doing it with the United States without much success, I would say, because the reason is very political. If a president has been elected on the plan that he will give jobs to his own country,
so it won't also going to help much.
Not much, I think so. But I think there is time that you take a relook all your bilateral labor protection, labor agreements, because other countries are also catching up. I think it's a wake-up call for government of India, especially the data which is coming from Gulf countries. 33% drop year to year in people going to these 6 countries. It's a huge thing to look at.
I think that's a big number. 33% drop in Indian workers going to the Gulf, and that's very
not
right.
only because they've closed doors to jobs, because of other factors.
But because of other factors, and as Jan said, it indeed is a wake-up call for the government of India as to does it have a task to perform vis-a-vis the bilateral agreements that it has have. But my point is that even if you do work that out, you are going to it's going to serve a limited purpose. I think the real questions is what are we doing with our own education system, especially higher education, and what are we going to do with the jobs at home? Because ours has been last 5 years we have seen growth, and we keep boasting about 7% plus growth. We don't see that translating into newer jobs. And there are scores of every year. You had some interesting statistics about the engineering colleges. Why don't we take a look at it? But just before that, Poonam, I think we're getting some great responses from our audiences, but we would also want them to like this conversation that is going on. If you like it, please press the like button. Do share this conversation and keep bringing in your questions. I think there was one of the questions that came up was, so we have to. That's Kogan Sapam is asking the right. He's making that point. Then we have to build up Indian job infrastructure with which we are lacking in. I think that's a very, very valid point. But let's talk a bit about the way we have gone about this engineering college thing. Because you have the statistics, why don't you share that?
There are some interesting statistics specifically about engineering colleges, which is in 2006-07. There were 1,511 engineering colleges in India, and between 2014-15, the number went up to 3,345. So there is a sort of growth in the number of engineering colleges in the country, but what are all the engineering graduates who are coming out? What kind of jobs can they expect? Because a lot of data also shows that there are not that many jobs for engineers really after they come out of college. There are very few jobs available to them. So what is this large number of students going to do? They're going to join, because in India the traditional thinking is that if you become an engineer, your life is made and you will get a job. That's not true actually. Parents often take large loans or sell off property to try and put their kids through engineering college, and at the end of it, if the students are not even sure of getting a job, then I think it's quite an explosive situation.
Because we already had a problem. You talked about the 2006 numbers when there were about 1,500 engineering colleges recognized by the AICTE, I would guess. Even then we had a problem that only 25% of the people graduating from these colleges were deemed as employable. And today that number of graduates has doubled. And I do not know what would that ratio be, because I don't think that ratio would have changed much, because most of these colleges are shops. And when the times are good, you could hire people, companies could risk hiring people even if they were not employable and train them on the job. But when times are bad, companies are looking to cut costs on all possible heads. They are not willing to take up the responsibility of training them on the job. So that even makes the crisis bigger. And what is worrisome to me is that, there was a time in the last 10-15 years, people in cities, people in small towns did well economically, and could leverage that economic well-being to take big loans or to put their hard-earned savings to their child's education. And there's a hell lot of money that people spend on all of these colleges, and now not to be sure what your child gets to do after he or she comes out. Is clearly something that we are headed for a crisis. And I do not see that there is any reckoning of the fact that the real problem lies in the way we have gone about managing our education system, the way we have gone about actually managing our economic growth question, whether the strategies, the policies that we have opted to pursue high growth, whether we have done enough to pay attention to that these create new jobs, and if they were creating new jobs, are we doing enough to ensure that our education system creates employable graduates every year? So we are in a situation where we are not looking at these questions. We seem to be, people around seem to be more interested about saving cows and looking at how the social engineering can be extended to win more elections. I mean, unfortunately, this is the reality. Nobody is talking. Look at, if you look at the media, newspaper headlines over the past 2 years, from surgical strike to cow slaughter, we have been talking about all kinds of things that really do not make they're not going to be making any difference to the way Indians live. But the real questions of education, employment, the nature of the growth strategies that you need to pursue, don't seem to be paying much attention, and that's where we stand, unfortunately.
In fact, you mentioned education, an interesting finding of many research studies. I'm talking specifically about engineers, since we mentioned that earlier, is that there are two problems. One, there are not enough jobs, and secondly, the places where they study don't impart the soft skills and knowledge needed. So a lot of the engineering graduates are unemployable also. So there are two problems here. There are not enough jobs, and the second thing is, institutions are not doing enough to produce students who have all-round development, rather than just a very narrow definition of what they know about their particular subject. But to come back to the visa schemes across the world, is it really the death of the Indian middle-class dream to go send their children abroad, or for young men and women to seek their sort of, within quotes, fortunes abroad and work in different countries? Are we seeing that the global citizen is no longer really the global citizen?
I mean, that's precisely what I argued, that it is time for the Indian middle class to reinvent itself now.
What should they do?
Well, as I said, what is it what is it that a US job or US education meant to the parents, or to the child, or to the student?
That high quality education,
good job, opportunity. You need to create, that imagery of a land of opportunity here, and surely we can do that, provided we stop talking about things. We are unfortunately focused on everything that will take this country back in time, and we probably are doing that to hide our failure to deliver on those things. We can we talk about Skill India. I mean, the Skill India thing has not taken off. Look, where will skills come from? For skills to come, you need institutions. You need to build institutions. I don't think, we are, as we speak, we are cutting back on MPhil and PhD seats. We are cutting back on MPhil and PhD fellowships. We do not respect, we haven't made teacher a job that attracts good talent. We need to be talking about these things. We need to be thinking about these things. I think there are some good questions coming up. How about regulating the seats in particular field to avoid the mass employment in our country or underpaid jobs? Well, I think that's a very regressive way of looking at it. I think everyone in this country has the right to pursue the best of education. It is the responsibility of the state, the ruling political class, and the citizens at large to ensure that we have a situation like that, to ensure that we work towards that. I think limiting good education to a few people in the name of quality is something which.
And education in India has always been a tool of social and economic empowerment.
Absolutely.
So we can't deny.
We need more of that. We need more of that, but we need more of that with quality. Swagata Pakira asks, parents should change the thought process. I am lucky in this case where my parents do not believe in a piece of paper where some numbers are written doesn't show my capabilities. Absolutely fine. I mean, I think that is, again, this whole thing of getting 98%, 99%, and, it doesn't make any difference.
Rajesh, it is so hard for even bright students to get into higher education in India, to get into good colleges and universities. Because there is just so much pressure on the seats.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of them have to they are forced to look abroad because they don't find a good institution where they can be absorbed in India.
Yeah. So I think we will have an opportunity to discuss more about the education scenario. Because I'm getting tempted by the questions that are coming up to limit, to sort of keep this discussion to the visa curves and the job scene. I think there are questions for you. Kogen is asking if India is the only country that has been affected. There's also another question about, is Canada's liberal immigration policy a source of relief?
If I can answer these two questions. Number one, India is the only country affected. But if you look at the size of Indian remittance market as well as the number of people going abroad, take the example of Australia. This 457 visa scheme, which is short-term skilled visa scheme for professionals. So there were 95,000 people under the scheme. Almost 30% of them were from India. The number 2 is UK, hardly 19%. Number 3 is China, which is less than 6%. So in such situation, Indians are not the only people who are affected, but Indians are the people who have hit very hard. And also when it comes to Canada, the only bright spot there is that Prime Minister Trudeau is playing a different kind of politics. He is playing the politics which is opposite of what Trump has been doing. So Canada will look to be a liberal country, attractive to immigrants, etc. for at least some time. But if you look at the global trend across the world, most of the countries are getting closed. Like they all are becoming inward looking. And also when something happens in the United States, there is a tendency worldwide, including in India, everybody will follow that.
United States sets the trend.
Yeah, they sets the trend. So I think it's not a great place as far as the world job place for Indians are concerned. But at the same time, this is how globalization works. If jobs are not there in America, you will have to find jobs somewhere else. There are many economies which are growing. There are many developing countries. They all need some skilled people. There are sectors other than IT which will be expanding. For example, let's say infrastructure, which also will need engineers. So I think you will
Which countries, for example, could you mention one or two where you feel that Indians could go and work?
So for example, most of these countries, you look at Southeast Asian countries, even South Asian countries, like all countries, for example, Bangladesh. So it's not a very glamorous thing to go and work in Bangladesh for Indians. But Bangladesh has many ambitious schemes. Like they want to make Bangladesh with power sufficient in the year 2020. It's a huge scheme. A lot of activities are happening there. And India is their main partner. But it is very difficult for an average Indian to think of going to Bangladesh and work. Similar things are happening in many smaller countries. But the advantage
Africa? Anything?
Africa is there, but no? Africa is also in the same track.
Don't command a premium in the marriage market.
Yeah,
Going to this country, that's unfortunately the reality.
Yeah.
So America, as Rajesh was saying, is a dream. Others are it's a job destination. When your choice is between a dream and a job destination, people would love to have more of their dreams come true rather than going to work and earn their livelihood.
But Rajesh, as we've seen, history you don't look at in a few years, you look at it in decades. So do you see a scenario where this current inward-looking trend in the whole world will be reversed at some point?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, these are phases you go through, and the history suggests that the world has always been more open than closed. And that's the hope with which we live, and that's how our civilization has evolved. So I don't think that this is something which is going to be there for all time to come. But yet, in the interim,
in the near future,
it's going to be this way for some time. Could be several years. Could extend up to a decade.
Maybe a generation would suffer, or two generations would suffer.
But if that is the crisis, I take this crisis as an opportunity. And what is that opportunity that it presents? The opportunity it presents is for us to look inward and say that how we can create opportunity here for our people rather than forcing them to go abroad or be affected that they do not have jobs because economies elsewhere are shutting their doors. I think some of our readers or audiences who have been following our discussion and have come up with very, very appropriate comments. There is saturation going abroad. Ravi says it very rightly so. So we have to look inwards. The issues being pursued by the government are trivial. I think a very valid point. If you guys seem to be agreeing with us. So like the Facebook Live that you are on, share it, get it out to a wider audience. We thank you for watching us. Ravi Tevatia is coming up with a question. Governments are not coming up with jobs to make state initiatives and schemes digitally available to its consumers. He also makes a point that there are hardly any computer science graduates hired by our central and state governments. Well, people are hired, but there aren't just enough jobs, and that's what we were talking about. That it is time for the government to really take up this question. You would like to respond to the question Neetu Kumar is raising? My question is why we say get to good universities and schools, why they're not not good, so that we don't have to choose. Most people end up abroad as either they can't get into good education facilities there or so-called good paid jobs.
But Neetu is right. There are not enough quality educational institutions in the country where you can go. You can literally count them on the fingers of your hands. I mean, we have a lot of universities, but they are not places you would, really want to go to. So, yeah. So I think this conversation about education and jobs in India should be carried forward and amplified, and it seems to be the.
If you allow me to have the last word, I would say if the middle class has to reinvent itself, one of the things that it has to do today is not be a spectator to what is happening, but be a catalyst in the change that you want to bring in, which is make this a place where we excel in education, and make this a place where the opportunities gather.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching us.
Thank you.
And do share this conversation, press the like button, and keep watching us.